Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me. And I also wanted
Thank
to
you
say
so
thank
much
you
for
to,
inviting me. And I
oh, sorry, Fred, can I add? Yeah. I also wanted to say thank you to Zamfira to making this introduction. And thank you, Francesco, for making this collaboration so fantastic. I really enjoyed our time in preparing for today. So thank you so much. Next slide, please. So we know that transitioning back to the rehearsal room is going to present some hurdles, both for conductors and choristers. And it's definitely easier to be proactive and plan than to wait for problems to surface. So I'd like to start off with a huge shout out to everybody here today for taking the time to be proactive in preparing for the transition back to the rehearsal room. First, I think it's important for everyone to recognize their strengths as well as their limitations when it comes to the well-being of the choristers. You may feel you need to have all the answers, but I would like to reassure you that you don't. You don't need to have them all, but you do need to know how to direct your choristers. And I strongly suggest that you put together a list of resources that you can share with your choristers. For example, is there a telephone helpline, online resources? Phone apps are quite popular these days. Contacts to healthcare professionals and clinics. As well, are there any links or contact information you can share that would support mindfulness, such as meditation activities, for example? And to share these resources with everybody right away. These resources are not just for people who are asking for help. It's important to normalize the topic of supports. In this way, you can role model that asking for help and seeking support is a good thing. And you can invite choristers to add to the resource list. You can make it live by having it as a shared document on a Google platform, for example. I think we've all become very savvy using various online platforms. And you can, and then when we're back to in-person practices, printing this copy and bringing it to the practices, because it's not just enough to share the resource list once, but to remind choristers regularly about resources. And this needs to be part of the weekly conversation. So what might be some barriers for the choristers? So we can assume that there will be those who have a fear of getting sick, of passing COVID-19 to a loved one, and reviewing with the choristers the protocols that will be in place will be really important. And it's important to provide this information in a way that's very simple. I personally have received many emails about COVID-19 precautions, and halfway through, I've just given up reading the email. I've found it so overwhelming. So keep it simple, use images, perhaps create a 30-second video about how you plan to keep your choristers safe. And this can be shared as a regular reminder. Another barrier to transitioning back to the rehearsal room might be breaking the habit of living a relatively, oh, no, we're still on the other one, sorry. Other slide. Yes. Another barrier to transitioning back to the rehearsal room might be breaking the habit of living a relatively recluse lifestyle for over a year. And to state the obvious, we're not used to being around people anymore in big groups or participating in events together outside of our immediate family. So yeah, it's going to feel strange. to be around people. And it's important to highlight this to the choristers before returning back to the rehearsal room, right? This proactive approach. And let me put it like this. Imagine you see a swimming pool and you are super excited to jump in. You swam in the same pool last year. It was beautiful. You have good memories of swimming in this pool. You jump in, and to your shock, the water is so cold. It's not how you remembered it to be. Now, if someone had warned you that the water had not been heated, you would have entered the pool more slowly, taken precautions, eased your way into the water. And that is going to be part of your new role, is easing the choristers back into the rehearsal room by providing caution and moving slowly. Next slide, please. Now, of course, as conductors, you may also need easing in. So I would like to remind you to be kind to yourself and ensure that you are also reaching out for support on your journey back to the rehearsal room. It's important to set reasonable and flexible expectations. If we've learned anything over this last year, is we need to be flexible. And we need to be reasonable and flexible in our expectations, both for ourselves, for yourselves as conductors, as well as for our choristers and for the choir as a whole. And when you feel a chorister is struggling or members of your choir are struggling, it can be tempting to feel it's a reflection on you. And I'd like to take this moment to ask you, take a deep breath and remind yourselves, we've all had our worlds turned upside down over this last year, and we don't know what our new normal is going to look like. And a struggling chorister is a reflection of a difficult time. It's not a reflection of you as a conductor. So what you can do is provide an invitation to a safe space, to a feeling of belonging, to a space of compassion, to a space of patience and non-judgment, which I'm sure you already provide in order to have the thriving choirs that you have. Transitioning back to the rehearsal room is going to be different for everyone. And how people feel about transitioning back is going to change from week to week for each chorister. Again, for this reason, it's important to have reasonable and flexible expectations. To be patient with yourself, your choristers, recognize what's beyond your control. We've certainly had a lot of practice with that. Now, to support your choristers, it's important to remember that you also need to support yourself. And for those of you who have been on an airplane before, I want you to think about the safety protocols that the flight attendant shares. They say, in the case of an emergency, oxygen masks will drop. Please secure your own oxygen mask before assisting others. So please think about this and make sure your supports are in place in order to best support your choristers. Next slide, please. So what are some things that you can do to start proactively, emotionally preparing choristers to the rehearsal space? So be proactive in starting the conversation about wellness. Have a check-in with your choristers. How are they feeling about returning? Have these conversations on shared platforms such as Zoom, which we're pretty used to doing, and ask the choristers to type in the chat. What are they excited about when thinking about returning, and what are they concerned about? And ask them to type it in the chat. And this is a way for choristers to see that they're not alone in what they are thinking and how they're feeling, because other people are typing the same thing. And that validation is really important. Um, so, a benefit to the online world that we've been using is that it also provides our voice to be heard. So, people can share things that maybe they would not have shared if they had to speak in front of others. So, I think we can embrace this new platform as a way to prepare for being back in person and giving people a voice to share how they're feeling. And um, and again, if things come up beyond your scope, you have that resource list. So always share that resource list. Remind choristers about that. And as singers, you all know the importance of breathing. Breathe with intent. It's so powerful in lowering anxiety. Breathe together. Even online, breathe together on Zoom. It's a great, safe way to connect and start remembering what it's like to physically be together, even though you're not yet, but you're practicing for this and breathing. And create new warm up habits that include self care, reminding choristers when singing at home to take those deep breaths, do a body scan. Where are you holding stress? Let it go. Do another body scan. Are your feet firmly grounded? Do you feel grounded? Where do you need again to let go? Hear music in your mind that you're wanting to sing. Acknowledge what enters your mind as you're thinking about being in the rehearsal room. Acknowledge those thoughts and also let them go. Let this become a regular routine as part of the warm up. So this wellness becomes incorporated into your regular choir practices online and then into the rehearsal room. And finally, use your creativity to engage your choristers. Ask them to share their favorite songs and how would they change some of the words to reflect how they are feeling about returning to the rehearsal room. It's often more approachable to express oneself when talking about lyrics of a song, especially as singers, than just finding the words. Perhaps write a new song together about the year 2020, about pandemic life, about hopes and fears. This doesn't need to be a song that you're going to practice and perform or compete with, but just part of well-being and reconnecting together. In regards to choosing repertoire, maybe think about repertoire that reflects change, growth, fear, and strength, to help acknowledge the various experiences that the choir has had. And as you know, singing brings us together. And just as many hands make for light work, shared voices make for a light heart, free from heaviness of fear and anxiety. So I'm going to leave you with that in closing up. And I look forward to any questions you have. And if anybody would like to connect with me on any platforms, I do welcome you to do so. Thank you.